Greetings friends, I'm Bobby, and in today's video I'm going to be going through my 2020 goals and talking about which ones I completed, which ones I sort of tried, and which ones I completely gave up on. So the first goal is my GoodReads goal for this year, which was to complete 50 books. So far I have only managed to complete 38 books, and at this point it seems impossible for me to actually reach 50 books. I still have 12 books left to complete my goal, and the most books I have read in 1 month so far this year is 9? I think it was 9, 8 or 9, and that was when I had 2 months off work and I didn't have anything else to do other than read. So this year I did fail my GoodReads goal, which is a shame, but next year is another chance and hopefully I will do better. The second goal on my list is to read one non-fiction book each month. I have not read a single non-fiction book this year, so I think I failed. The third goal was to read one graphic novel each month, and so far I have read 7 graphic novels. I have another graphic novel planned for December, so hopefully I will get to that one, but I'm not sure I will actually reach 12. The third goal on my list was to read 6 classics this year. So far I have read 1, which was The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. I plan on reading Alice's Adventures in Wonderland this month, so hopefully that will be another one, but I think I've still completely failed this goal. Goal number 5 was to read 1 tome each month, which means a book over 500 pages. So far I have read 4 tomes, and that's not even half of my goal, which is a shame, but I'm not going to be getting to any more because it is so close to the end of the year now and I don't have any time for it. My next goal was to read no more than 1 reread each month. I have only reread 2 books this year, which were the 5th Harry Potter book and Wondersmith by Jessica Townsend. This wasn't a particularly difficult goal, considering that it was to not do something. It was sort of an anti-goal, I guess. But I'm still pleased that I spent more time reading new books instead of using up my reading time on books that I already know. The next goal on my list was to complete Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials series. So books 2 and 3, The Subtle Knife and The Amber Spyglass, which I've never read before. I read the first book in the series, Northern Lights, which is also known as The Golden Compass, back in 2018. I really enjoyed it, but it's a little bit maybe depressing. It's got a lot of, it's a very emotional story, and from what I've heard, it doesn't get more cheerful throughout the series, which is a little bit off-putting, but in any case, I did not read either of these books this year. I am still interested in completing this series, but I just don't have any motivation for it at this point in time, but I might get to it in the next year or 2. The next goal on my list was to catch up with Rick Riordan's books. I have previously read Percy Jackson series, The Heroes of Olympus, and I started Magnus Chase and The Trials of Apollo. So this year I read Trials of Apollo, The Dark Prophecy, which is the 2nd book in this series. I enjoyed it, but I am losing interest in Rick Riordan's books. They're just not really for me anymore. I find a lot of the plot lines kind of samey, and I just don't really want to spend any more time on them. They've always taken me quite a lot of time to get through, no matter how short these books are. I find they're quite slow reads for me, so at this moment I don't have much interest in reading any more of Rick Riordan's books. The next goal on my list was to read 1 ebook each month. I have managed to complete 5 ebooks this year, which were A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab, We Were Liars by E. Lockhart, The Bells by Donielle Clayton, Devil Darling Spy by Matt Killeen, and The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. For the most part, I really enjoyed most of these books, and I'm currently halfway through the 2nd Shades of Magic book, A Gathering of Shadows, which hopefully I will complete before the end of the year. This means that I have half completed my goal, also known as failing my goal. So I only managed to get halfway through that goal, and that is yet another incomplete goal. And then the 10th and final goal on my list was to listen to 1 audiobook each month. I have only listened to 5 audiobooks this year, which were The Keeper of Lost Cities Exile by Shannon Messenger, Swallows and Amazons by Arthur Ransom, The Horse and His Boy by C.S. Lewis, Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn, and A Place Called Perfect by Helena Duggan. For the most part, I enjoyed all of those books, and I really enjoyed the experience of listening to more audiobooks. I could have put in more effort to listen to more audiobooks, but they're not my favourite way of consuming stories, so that was a little off-putting. So in addition to those 10 goals, I also had some specific books that I wanted to read this year. So I'm going to go through those now and tell you whether or not I actually read all of them. So the first book on my list is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I have not read this book this year. I've heard so many good things about this story and I'm really excited for reading it, but I'm very intimidated by the size. However, I am planning on reading this book next year, but to be honest, I've been saying that for the past 2 years, so who knows. The second book on my list is The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson, which is the second book in the Mistborn trilogy. I did read this book, and I also read the following book, The Hero of Ages, completing this trilogy. I enjoyed the series. It wasn't my favourite fantasy series that I've read, but that might just be because I was going through reading slumps all year, and that was really off-putting when I'm trying to read a really chunky story. Book 3 on my list is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Lewis Sands. This is a contemporary romance. It's LGBT fiction. I read this book this year, quite early on, and I really enjoyed it. It's a nice, gentle story. It's quite emotional in parts, but it was a very fun read, and I can sort of see why it's so hyped. So yeah, this was a really good book, and I enjoyed reading it. The fourth book on my list is Children of Blood and Bone by Tony Adeyemi. This is a young adult fantasy story. It is the first in a series, and it is about a race of people who have had their magic stolen, and it follows 2 teenage girls as they go on a quest to retrieve the magic. I haven't read it. Simple as that. I didn't read it. I don't feel too excited for this book at the moment. I'm not sure why. It's just not interesting me right now, so I've been putting it off for a little while. The next book on my list is Stalking Jack the Ripper by Kerry Maniscalco. This is the first in a series of Victorian-era detective novels in which a woman has to investigate all these mysteries in secret because it is not proper for women to be detectives in this time. So the series goes Stalking Jack the Ripper, Hunting Prince Dracula, there's one about Houdini, and then there's one about the devil. They all sound really interesting, but I have not read this book this year. I am very excited to get to this book, and I'm not sure why I've been putting it off, because I am so intrigued by this series. It's supposed to be really good, and I'm hoping to get to it early in 2021. Book number 6 on my list is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. This is a children's classic and it's a very famous story, but I haven't read it yet this year. It has been on at least 3 TBRs this year, but I just haven't got around to it. It is on my December TBR and I'm hoping to get to it this month. It is currently the 14th, so hopefully I still have enough time to read this book, and it isn't very long. Most of this book is introduction and notes about the story. So hopefully I will be able to get to that in the next 2 weeks. And then we have The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. This is again a very short story, but it's another one that I haven't managed to read this year. This is a very popular sci-fi story about a man who goes into space with some aliens, and I don't really know a lot more about it than that, to be honest. However, I've owned this book for a few years and I've still not got around to it. This book is only 180 pages. I might be able to get to it in the next couple of weeks, but it isn't intriguing me very much. I'm not too thrilled about reading this book, so I might put it off as well. Book number 8 is Wonder by R.J. Palacio. This is a children's contemporary fiction story about a boy with a facial disfigurement who starts a new school, and it follows his experience there. And it's supposed to be a really popular story, but I have not read this book yet, and I'll be honest, I'm not all that excited for reading it. I am really starting to lose interest in contemporary fiction, and it's just not one of my priorities at the moment, even though it's on my priority list for the year. But right now, not really a priority. The next book on my list is The Shock of the Fall by Nathan Filer. This is a contemporary fiction novel about a young man who suffers from mental illness. It talks a lot about grief and struggles with mental health, and it was a really emotional book. It's one book that I have actually read this year. So I have read this book and it was really emotional. It was quite hard-hitting at times. This book does discuss grief, mental illness, and I think it talks about drug use. So just be aware of that if you're thinking of reading this, but I found it a really enjoyable read. It kept my attention for such a long time, and it is one of a few contemporary fiction novels that I have actually enjoyed recently. Book number 10 on my list is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is a story about Greek heroes who fall in love, and it's a romance story following Achilles and Patroclus. I've had this book since 2013. I still haven't read it. I know I really ought to be getting to this book soon because I've had it for about 7 years now, but I just haven't been too interested in reading this sort of story recently, so I really have been putting this off. The penultimate book on my list I do not have with me at the moment, but that is The Martian by Andy Weir. This is a sci-fi novel following a man who gets stuck on Mars. It was really popular around 2014, 2015, and I did buy this book because of the hype, and I've been really excited for reading this book, but I've just never got around to it, and I still haven't read it. And I don't really know why I'm not reading this book, because I was so excited for it when I first got it, and I think the hype has just put me off reading it a little bit because I worry that it's not going to live up to the hype, which is a reason why I don't read a lot of my books, to be honest. And the final book on my list is another one that I've had for about 6 years, and that is Horns by Joe Hill. I bought this book because I saw a movie poster for it with Daniel Radcliffe, and that encouraged me to look up the story. However, I have not read it. It sounds really interesting as well, and I've been quite excited for reading this recently. I was considering reading it in October, but I just never got around to it. I think I'm a little intimidated by the genre. I don't tend to read horror or anything that might be slightly scary, so that is something quite new to me, and I am a little intimidated by the story. I do, however, want to prioritise this book next year because it does sound really, really good. So that's the end of my wrap up for my 2020 goals. As you can see, I didn't do very well with these goals, but I am still pleased with the number of books that I have read, and it's just motivating me to do better next year. So I will be bringing you a new goals list for the coming year, and I am really excited to share that with you. If you have any comments about the books I've mentioned in this video, please let me know, and let me know how well you did on the goals that you had for this year. My Instagram, Twitter and GoodReads are in the description below, and I hope you have a good week. See you in my next video. Bye!